Okay, today we are going to talk about Chapter 24 and Lesson 2, America Getting into the War. All right, so we had been trying to stay out of this war, trying to stay neutral. That is difficult though because we have many immigrants and from both sides, right? So we have German immigrants, we have all the different countries that are involved. We have a lot of immigrants. I will say that we probably had more, the feeling in America is probably more on the Allies side than on German side. Um, both sides are trying to use a lot of propaganda to influence people's opinion. Okay, and propaganda is when you're definitely trying to prey on their like feelings, like look at this poster, right? They're obviously making the Germans to be like the devil, and saying how they're enjoying killing people and everything. So definitely trying to sway your feelings. Okay, so the US is trying to stay out of it. The Germans say, though, that the Americans don't seem very neutral. And the reason they think that is for a couple of reasons. One, we seem to be trading with the Allies, but we're not trading with the Germans. And the reason for that is because the British put in a pretty effective blockade. And so we can't really trade with the Germans, but of course the Allies are letting us come safely to them. So you can see why the Germans would feel like that's not really us being neutral because we're helping, the other side get supplies. The other thing that they didn't like was that both Great Britain and France, allies, right, borrowed money from American banks to help pay for their war effort. So again, that appears to be helping the allies. Okay, Americans say, of course, we're just trying to make money. Um, the other thing that gets us into the war is unfortunately this sinking of the Lusitania. The Lusitania was a passenger ship. It was a French. Um, it was British, and it was off of the coast of Ireland, but there were Americans on it, and so a lot of people died when the ship was sunk. 1,000 people about, and 128 of them were Americans. And unfortunately, right, there was a big call to like how the Germans were terrible for doing this. It was a passenger ship, although later we did find out that perhaps there were some war materials on board. Okay. So the Germans know that that's dangerous. If Americans are getting upset that their Americans are dying, they might go in the war on the Allies' side. So to appease us, they did something called the Sussex Pledge. That happened when another ship went down. This one was now a French ship called the Sussex. And in the Sussex, when that one went down, again, some Americans are injured this time. And so they give money to the Americans to help appease them. And they do this pledge, which basically says, oh, okay, sorry, we'll warn neutral ships or passenger vessels before attacking from now on. So trying to like appease people a little bit to try to keep the Americans out of it. Okay. And the president at the time, President Wilson, gets reelected, and he ran on a slogan of "He has kept us out of war," right? Which up till this point had been true. It wasn't an overwhelming win because things are pretty, there's some people who aren't thrilled about how things are going, but he did win. Okay, so that's what's happening. And then he gets reelected, and then of course we do end up joining the war. And so why are we ending up joining it? Well, first of all of a sudden in January of 1917, the Germans totally change their mind and they say, forget it, we're doing unrestricted submarine warfare, meaning that we will sink on sight any merchant vessels that go into Allied ports, regardless if they're armed or not. So they know when they say that the U.S. could be, feel targeted and then therefore join on the Allies' side. But they took the risk that they thought that they could, defeat the Allies before the Americans are able to actually mount a serious war effort. Okay. And then another thing happens, which really convinces us, is we find out about the Zimmerman note. The Zimmerman note, or sometimes it's called the Zimmerman telegram, was a telegram, and you can see it's in code here, so you can't see what it exactly says. But basically, it was intercepted by the British, and I have an Edpuzzle about this, about how that happened. And the note, the telegram, was from the German foreign minister, Arthur Zimmerman. That's why it's called the Zimmerman note. And it was sent to Mexico. And basically, it said to Mexico, hey, if the U.S. come in on in the war, we want to have an alliance with you, and right, if you'll help fight for us, then we'll make sure you get something out of it. So you see in this political cartoon, they're basically saying, we'll make sure you get some of the land. And remember, that's the land that originally was part of Mexico, right? And so they would like to get it back. Okay. All right. So this is like obviously seen as a sign of aggression, right? That Americans feel very like betrayed by the Germans trying to make a deal behind America's back. Okay. The other thing that happens around this time is Russia changes from an autocracy, meaning one person is in total control, to a more democratic government. So when that change happens in Russia, a lot of Americans are like, see, we could actually join in on the Allies now and feel okay about it, because Russia was allies, right? And because now we could say, oh, we're fighting for democracy, right? And now that they actually are more democratic also. So that just made people feel better about the war. And then, of course, the Germans go ahead and start sinking our submarines. Our merchant ships with their submarines. So 4 American ships are shot down and 36 Americans die. And basically we say, okay, like we can't, we can't keep out of it anymore. So we declare war in April of 1917. And we have to mount a war effort. So we have the first ever draft, military draft. It's technically called the Selective Service Act. And so at this point in history, the men, if you were 21 to 30, you had to register, and then they would pick people to go, and then they have to go to war instead of just being voluntary. Okay, so that's what a draft is. And for the first time, women are allowed to serve. They are not in combat roles at this point. They are kept, and you can see these ladies are dealing with the communications. So they were helpful, but not obviously in combat roles. African Americans, of course, joined quite a bit, and sadly still are treated, they're in segregated units, and they still have a lot of bad treatment during this war effort, but to go with the times, right? But they do serve, and serve well.